well. And our first speaker is Muriel Pécastaing-Boissiè from the Sorbonne, senior lecturer in British civilization and language. And Muriel has a very interesting topic for us today, which is entitled "All Theosophists to be Propagandists," a discussion of the paradoxes of Annie Besant's global missionary strategies. So we are very much looking forward to this, Muriel. So now the word is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Here I go. Okay. Can you see it, everyone? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for welcoming me tonight. Really, I have to say I'm honored, really, and I'm really sorry I could not attend the whole thing, but I'm really, really happy to be with you tonight. Okay, so well, you obviously all know about Annie Besant, so I'll just start with a few useful reminders. Annie Besant was born Annie Wood in London in 1847, and she was already famous, not to say notorious, when she decided to join the Theosophical Society in 1889 after she wrote a review of Helena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. She was legally separated from her husband, an Anglican clergyman, and she had been fighting for free thought as vice president of the National Secular Society for 25 years. She had also been a socialist activist since 1885. Now, Besant, who made a living as a lecturer and a journalist, became co-editor alongside Blavatsky of the London-based monthly Lucifer. We've just talked about it almost right away. And Theosophists to be Propagandists was the title she gave to her editorial of the December 1891 issue of the paper, so just a few months after Blavatsky passed away in May 1891. And it was a question to which Besant answered, "So far as I'm personally concerned, propaganda in every suitable form, by platform, pen, private conversation, correspondence, all in their several ways, are equally available and equally right." And indeed, Besant embarked on what can be defined as a global theosophical mission. In 1893, she traveled to Chicago to represent Theosophists in the World Parliament of Religions that was organized to coincide with the Universal Exhibition, and that was followed by what was her fourth American lecture tour already. She then went on a third journey to India that she reached in November for a tour of over 120 lectures throughout the country. Besant settled in India in 1895, first in Benares and then in the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in India from 1907. And that was the year she was first elected president of the Theosophical Society. And she remained at the head of the TS until her death in 1933. However, as we shall see, except during the First World War, Besant would leave India for Europe or the United States during the hottest month to go on long lecture tours on theosophy, and she also traveled several times to Australia and to New Zealand. Meanwhile, in 1909, Jiddu Krishnamurti was discovered aged 14 on the beach at Adyar by Theosophist Charles W. Leadbeater. Leadbeater and Besant believed Krishnamurti was the vehicle for one of the masters, Lord Maitreya, the world teacher. So Besant, as you know, adopted Krishnamurti and his younger brother Nitya in 1910, and she launched the Order of the Star in the East the following year to prepare the world for the arrival of its teacher, a role which, as you know, Krishnamurti renounced in 1929. Besant had also been openly critical of British imperialism since the 1870s. she joined the Indian National Congress in 1913, launched 2 Indian nationalist papers, and organized her Home Rule League in 1916. As a result, she was put under house arrest by the British authorities in 1917, which caused a wave of indignation throughout India when all the main nationalist leaders assured her of their support, including Jinnah, the Nehrus, father and son, and Gandhi. The last 3, by the way, having been Theosophists at one point or another. Besant was released in December 1917 and went on to be elected president of the Indian National Congress a few days later. Now, when Besant became president of the Theosophical Society in 1907, there were about 11,000 active members throughout the world. By 1928, the society could boast 45,000 members throughout the world. So, why should we discuss Besant's apparently successful global missionary strategies? Because I identified 3 paradoxes that later led to important setbacks. First, in spite of the Theosophists' criticism of Christian missionaries in India, Besant resorted to many of the same means of action there to promote her theosophical interpretation of Hinduism. Meanwhile, in the West, Besant's popularizing of theosophy and her innovative global promotion of the worship of Krishnamurti as the word teacher conflicted with a claim that Theosophists had no dogma and with Theosophy's esoteric and elitist dimensions. And I'm going to explore this with you tonight. Okay, so first of all, the issue of the Christian missionaries in India and Theosophy and the way that conflicted with Besant's means of action there. Now, although Theosophists preached a form of tolerant syncretism, the founders of the TS were actually quite dismissive of Christianity. Blavatsky did not hesitate to challenge the Christian missionaries in India several times, but just like here, when she wrote in 1880 in the Anglo-Indian paper, The Pioneer, though not at all hostile to Christianity, that is, the ethics alleged, he said, to have been preached by Jesus of Nazareth, I, in common with many Theosophists, am very much so to the so-called Church of Christ. Well, such statements explain why Blavatsky was fiercely attacked by local missionaries, which led, as you know, to the Coulon affair. Emma Coulon had been Blavatsky's trusted secretary since 1871 in Egypt. She and her husband had joined Blavatsky in Adyar in 1880, but they did not get along with the Theosophists there to the point of being evicted from the compound in 1884. As a result, they had taken their revenge by sending to the Madras Christian College magazine about 70 letters said to be written by Blavatsky, in which he explained the conjuring tricks used to precipitate letters from the Mahatmas, to make their astral bodies visible, or to materialize various objects. And the Madras Christian College magazine, edited by Reverend George Patterson, published extracts from those letters under the headline, The Collapse of Kuthumi, the name of one of the Mahatmas. As a result, the Society for Psychical Research, based in Cambridge, sent a young Australian, Richard Oxon, to Adyar to inquire, and he famously concluded in his report that Blavatsky was one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting impostors in history. Well, as you can imagine, the Theosophists, for their part, denounced what they called the notorious Madras missionary plot devised by the Coulon, and Annie Besant shared that point of view. As a result, the relationship between Theosophists and Christian missionaries remained tense in India during Besant's presidency of the TS, and most probably because they competed for the same social group in India, the English-speaking educated Indians, most of whom were Brahmins. And the missionary attacks against Besant started from her first stay in India. Their Christian Literature Society, based in Madras, published a long pamphlet entitled Theosophy Exposed, or Mrs. Besant and a Guru, an appeal to educated Hindus. That opens on a summary of the Coulon affair, and it explains why Besant's first tour of India was so successful in those terms. Her profession of Hinduism, her outrageous flattery of everything Indian, and the vilification of England have made her immensely popular among ignorant and half-educated Hindus, which says quite a lot about what they thought of Hindus also. And the preface to the pamphlet is an appeal to Indian journalists, warning them against printing extracts from Besant's lectures. And those attacks never stopped. The following year, the same Christian Literature Society published Who is Mrs. Besant and Why Has She Come to India? In 1913, still, the missionary Edgar W. Thompson published The Theosophy of Mrs. Besant with a preface by the Anglican Bishop of Madras. Now, that same year, 1913, in India's awakening, Besant warned audience against those Christian missionaries. As a rule, they do not make many converts, but I tell you what they do. They dig up the roots of devotion and religion in the plastic soil of the boy's heart. They whip them with ridicule. They trample them with sarcasm. Very harsh also. Now, and this is where the paradox starts. Now, from the lecture Besant gave in 1893 on board the steamer that first brought her to India, she saw the country as the Holy Land, the mother of spirituality, the cradle of civilization. And in one of the first lectures there, called India's Mission Among Nations, Besant warned, if religions perish here, it will perish everywhere. And in India's hand is laid the sacred charge of keeping alive the torch of spirit amid the fogs and storms of increasing materialism. So, to her, India as a whole had a spiritual mission, and Besant called for a Hindu spiritual and cultural revival that she professed to support and to promote, but using the same strategies as the Christian missionaries to beat them at their own game, so to speak. Now, throughout the British Empire, Christian missionaries worked at translating the Bible into local languages to better spread the gospel. Besant used the same strategy, but she reversed it. She taught herself Sanskrit and published her first English translation of the Bhagavad Gita as early as 1895. And I studied by Yves Moulmater, Besant's several translations of the Gita varied in time, actually, often in answer to the reactions of other Theosophists who discussed them, but also according to her own agenda and according also to the readers she had in mind. Now, translating the Gita into English made it possible to distribute it in the West, obviously, but also among English-speaking Indians who were no longer fluent in Sanskrit. And in his autobiography, published in 1928, Gandhi himself recalled that he first read the Gita in 1890 in London in another English translation lent to him by Theosophists. He wrote, "Toward the end of my second year in England, I came across two Theosophists, actually they were Bertram and Archibald Cattley, I was constrained to tell them that I had not read the Gita, but that I would gladly read it with them, though my knowledge of Sanskrit was meager. This book stimulated in me the desire to read books on Hinduism and disabused me of the notion fostered by the missionaries that Hindus was rife with superstition. So, Annie Besant also founded schools in India using there again the same strategy as the Christian missionaries. So let's have a closer look at her educational reforms in India. Besant very soon decided to open a Hindu boys' school so that Hindu culture and traditions, she said, would still be transmitted. So the Maharaja of Benares offered up a portion of the premises and land of his grandfather's summer palace, and the Central Hindu College, CHC, was inaugurated there in 1898, followed by the Central Hindu Girls' School in 1904. In 1901, the CHC was officially recognized by the University of Allahabad and allowed to grant BAs and then MAs in Sanskrit and English from 1905. Then, in 1911, Besant allied with a nationalist and educationalist named Madan Mohan Malviya with the goal of founding this time a Hindu university in Benares. And the preamble of the petition for a royal charter of incorporation creating the University of India detailed Besant's aims. Eastern thought will take the lead and Western knowledge will be used to enrich but not to distort or to cripple the expanding national life, and the Benares Hindu University was inaugurated in 1916. So far, so good. However, things were not as straightforward as they sounded. In 1902-1903, Besant had published 3 textbooks for the pupils of the Central Hindu College: a catechism for boys and girls in Hindu religion and morals, an elementary textbook of Hindu religion and ethics, and an advanced textbook of Hindu religion and ethics. And as underlined by Kurt Leland, who's here with us tonight, Besant's theosophical bias was obvious in her presentation of Hinduism in them, especially in the 3rd textbook that actually offered a theosophical interpretation of Hindu cosmology. Then, from 1911, tensions developed between the pupils and the teachers of the Central Hindu College when Krishnamurti was promoted to future world teacher by Besant. George Arundel, then headmaster of the CHC, went as far as claiming that the college had been founded with the purpose of preparing for the advent of the world teacher. And the Order of the Star in the East was launched in 1911 from the CHC that became thus directly involved in Besant's neo-theosophical mission. As a result, one of the Indian supporters of the Central Hindu College, Raghavan Das, although he was a Theosophist himself and even the editor of Theosophy in India, openly criticized the shift. And he was not alone in this. The Central Hindu College was incorporated into the Benares Hindu University in 1916. I just told you about its creation, but only after Besant, Arundel, and about 20 other Theosophists resigned from the CHC Council, and Besant's textbooks that I just mentioned had to be dropped altogether. Besant was allowed to sit on the University Council, but only in an honorary capacity. And to me, such developments reveal the limits and the paradoxes of Annie Besant's missionary work in India. That is, in spite of her claims to be working for a Hindu revival, she adopted the Christian missionaries' global strategies to spread her theosophical interpretation of Hinduism, making her, to many Indians, just another missionary in India. What about the West? So, as mentioned in my introduction, ought Theosophists to be propagandists? That was the title of the editorial of the December 1891 issue of Lucifer. Now, in that editorial, Besant listed the main theosophical teachings that needed to be widely shared according to her. The doctrines of brotherhood, of reincarnation, of karma, of the sevenfold constitution of man, and of the universe. In that editorial, Besant used the parable of the sower from the Gospel of Matthew, and she asserted, "The time has now come when many in the West are ready to receive the seed, and the only way of reaching these is to proclaim the truth everywhere, so that those who are ready might hear and have opportunity of receiving it." Now, in the West, Besant's strategies differed from that of the Christian missionaries she had adopted in India. She decided to go on using the same means as when she fought for free thought or socialism. "So far as I'm personally concerned," she said, "propaganda in every suitable form, by platform, pen, private conversation, correspondence, all in their several ways, are equally available and equally right." But not all Theosophists agreed. It is alleged that to teach them by books is right, to teach them from the platform is wrong. Bluntly put, this means that the poor shall be left in darkness and ignorance. Besant, as a socialist, argued that the Theosophical Society is a brotherhood that recognizes no distinction of class. However, the paradox of what A.P. Sinnett had called the propagation of occult truth in 1881 had long been an issue among Theosophists, many of whom considered bringing theosophical teaching to a global audience as a transgression. Besant herself at the time was actually at the head of the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society. In 1887, Blavatsky had explained in a letter that she had created this esoteric school of theosophy to form, I quote, "exclusive occult students, willing to accept the teaching of which I am the channel and which I cannot impart except to pledged members." Like Blavatsky, in spite of what she said in that editorial, Besant went on sharing occult teachings with carefully selected theosophical students that never reached the public platform or the pages of theosophical periodicals. In fact, for all of Besant's claims, her theosophical mission never managed to break fully from social and occult elitism. In India, obviously, because she only addressed the English-speaking educated Indians, and by the way, that is something Gandhi used against her later, but also in the West, as Krishnamurti's entourage was not only almost exclusively upper middle class, but also selected or promoted through esoteric initiations. Yet, still, paradoxes here. At the same time, Besant did use the means of propaganda described in her 1891 editorial to try and reach a global audience, and first through the development of the Theosophical press. Now, Besant had been co-editor of the National Reformer, the National Secular Society's weekly, for about 15 years. And she had launched two periodicals in the 1880s, the monthly Our Corner and the socialist weekly The Link. So it should come as no surprise then that she should work at expanding the Theosophical press on a global level while contributing several hundred articles herself. Now, research into such theosophical periodicals is now greatly helped by the International Association for the Preservation of Spiritualist and Occult Periodical, YAPSOP, that is a non-profit academic research website founded in 2010, whose volunteers work on the digital preservation of those occult periodicals. And there are now about 330 titles online on their website, published before the Second World War for most of them. And that includes a large part of the 152 theosophical periodicals listed by the Campbell Theosophical Research Library in Australia. Among those theosophical periodicals, over 100 were published throughout the world at the time of Besant's presidency of the TS. And they constantly published, translated, and reprinted her lectures and articles. Besant was also editor of Lucifer, that later became the Theosophical Review, and of the Theosophists published in Adia. So circulation figures are really hard to come by, but Besant's global reach through those periodicals is undeniable. And this is without taking into account of pamphlets and books. And to date, the best bibliography of Annie Besant's over 1,400 books, pamphlets, and articles is the one compiled by Kurt Leland, shared on his website under the title Annie Besant Shrine. Many of Besant's articles were ad verbatim of her lectures. She was unanimously described and recalled as one of the best orators of her time. And she was aware of that. She was quite aware of that gift. So she would go on long international lecture tours every year, amounting to thousands of lectures in all. And John L. Crow
Muriel, sorry to interrupt. You're going into overtime now, just so you know.
Okay, I'm almost done. Okay, so John L. Crow studied those quite thoroughly, and you can have a look at this. And in 1927, aged nearly 80, Besant still gave 56 lectures in over 3 weeks in all of the European capitals, traveling from one to the next in a small plane. Now, much of Besant's lectures and writings clearly aimed at a global popularizing of theosophy, including with her bestseller, The Ancient Wisdom, which is actually a summary, okay, of Besant's secret doctrine. In Theosophy and the Theosophical Society, a lecture Besant gave in 1907, she made it very clear. She said, we have no dogma. We do not shoot out any man because he does not believe in theosophical teachings. However, Emilie Lutyens, quite disillusioned by them, recalled in her autobiography, the society persists in maintaining that it has no creed, but I knew of no theosophist in those days who did not believe in this invisible hierarchy and in the existence of superhuman masters and the path of discipleship. And this is another paradox of which Besant was quite aware. The contradiction between a global call for tolerance, open-mindedness, reasonable doubt, and questioning in the public lectures, and what appears to be the faith of many theosophists in the existence of the Mahatmas, in the literal truth of the secret doctrine, and in Krishnamurti as the word teacher. And actually, Lutyens herself used that word. And in 1930, still at the end of her life, during the Theosophical Convention in Benares, Besant described a global mission in such a paradoxical way. Okay, seeing, speaking of that tolerance, but still seeing that she considered that the growth of the Theosophical society depended on the existence of a portion of the members who believed strongly in the existence of the masters, and speaking of her own devotion. Now, and that is a whole issue around Krishnamurti because of that. The founding of the Order of the Star in 1911, with its own periodical, launched what amounted to a form of global worship of Krishnamurti that left very little room for discussing his being the world teacher, nor the validity of the esoteric initiations around him. And when it came to promoting Krishnamurti as a world teacher, Besant would use the latest modern technologies. The star camps were filmed. There were also radio programs. And as a consequence of that global strategy, Krishnamurti in many ways became as much an international star as the star in the East. And this is a picture of him by Albert Witzel at the time when Krishnamurti was living very close to Hollywood. Now, truth to say, Besant's global strategy was successful. By 1926, the Order of the Star in the East had 39,000 members in 42 countries. And she reached beyond Theosophy because 30% of those members did not belong to the Theosophical society. But that fact actually could be seen as an evidence of the unsolved tension between Besant's Theosophical mission and a global promotion of Krishnamurti. This led to the development of the Back to Blavatsky movement, and to someone like Vardia, for instance, himself, leaving Besant to join that movement, although he had been working with her for quite a long time. Now, to conclude, by the end of the 1920s, the unsolved paradoxes of Besant's global missionary strategies led to, according to me, two setbacks. First, in India, Besant lost the support of the new generation of Indian nationalists, including Gandhi, who came to view her strategies as serving Theosophy and a westernized Indian elite first. Admittedly, Besant criticized imperialism as an ideology, but she failed to reject the British Empire as an institution that she just tried to reform, and within which she still inscribed a large part of her global theosophical mission. In that, her strategies had remained uncomfortably close to those of the Christian missionaries in India and elsewhere. In the West, the tension between Besant's indefatigable worldwide popularizing of Theosophy as a tolerant and open-minded form of spiritual quest, and the social and esoteric elitism at work within the TS and even more around Krishnamurti led to his renouncing his role of the world teacher, as you know. Although he went on as a very successful global spiritual guide after that with his own international lecture. But many of his original followers never fully recovered from the shock. And I think that has to do with those paradoxes here. Sorry for being a little bit too long. Clearly, I had too much to say about all this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muriel, for that very fascinating talk. I really think you have done a lot of groundwork to show how Annie Besant really was a central person in the globalization of Theosophy, and how it took off in a specific direction, also with Krishnamurti. So thank you very much. And unfortunately, we don't have time now for questions because we're running a little bit over time. But please write to Muriel